Focus on Liberia. We discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Tim.
Additionally, we hope to identify capacity needs for project development and implementation. We anticipate that this dialogue will yield a clear mapping of available financing resources and innovative models for green investment, stronger collaboration among government partners and investors, identification of capacity gaps and training needs to accelerate project readiness, and also, which is most importantly, an enhanced pipeline
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture. At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything.
It is my single honor and pleasure to invite Mr. Aliu Mamadou Dian, who is the resident representative for UNDP in Liberia, to do us a keynote remarks on behalf of Mr. Matthias Nat, who is the regional director that cannot be present today for the regional group of Africa for UNDP, to make a brief remark to set the tone as we move forward. Thank you.
Who is representing the UNDP Africa Regional Director. He will be with us at the launch of the Atlas and at the opening of the pavilion. But he's unfortunately in another event, and hopefully he'll join us before the end of this session. So, on behalf of Matthias, distinguished guests, colleagues, and partners, it's an honor to welcome you to this important dialogue on the RX agenda, Liberia's bold vision for sustainable development through conservation and green investment. Today, we gather at a critical moment in global climate negotiations. The decision we make here in Belém will shape not only the future of our planet, but also the trajectory of nations like Liberia that stand at the front line of climate vulnerability. We all know that Liberia is blessed with rich biodiversity and vast resources that serve as a global carbon sink. Yet, these natural assets are under increasing pressure from climate change and unsustainable practices. To safeguard them, we must move beyond rhetoric to action that is finance, inclusive, and transformative. Why finance matters? Green finance is not just a slogan. It is a lifeline for climate resilience and sustainable growth. Without adequate resources, our ambition for renewable energy, for sustainable forestry and community-driven conservation will remain only aspirations. The arrest agenda seeks to unlock these resources by mobilizing climate funds, attracting private investment, and forging partnerships that deliver real impact on the ground. And Liberia's priorities are clear. First of all, we must map and access diverse funding streams from multilateral climate funds to innovative blended financing models. Second, we need to strengthen institutional capacity to develop bankable projects that meet international standards. And I will come back to those when I will be sharing my insight in the panel. Third, we must ensure that financing mechanisms are inclusive, benefiting rural communities, but also empowering local enterprises and youth innovators. This is not just about money. It's It's about trust, it's about transparency, and it's about governance. Liberia is committed to reforms that make climate finance tracking robust and equitable. We envision a future where payment for ecosystem services, for example, rewards forest-dependent communities and carbon markets operate with integrated. Dear friends, partnership is a cornerstone of success for all of us. We call on development partners, on private sector, private investors, regional institutions to join us in co-financing initiatives that protect ecosystems while creating green jobs, because together we can transform Liberia natural wealth into a driver of sustainable prosperity. As we engage in today's discussion, let us remember climate finance is not charity. It is an investment in global stability and shared futures. Liberia stands ready to lead by example. I think the atlas we have provided is really a big milestone on that leading by example. But we cannot do it alone. All our expertise, all partnerships, our resources and commitment are essential to make the arrest agenda a reality. I want to thank you and look forward to a dynamic exchange of ideas that will pave the way for actionable outcomes on behalf of Majas, NAB Regional Service Center Director for Africa UNDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amadou Mamadou Dia, for those insightful and inspiring words. We look at issue of inclusive financing. We mentioned the case of green financing as a level down into economic growth. We also talk about issue of mapping and accessing direct climate financing as a stream for economic growth as well. We encourage us to develop bankable projects towards our climate goals. We noted that financing mechanisms are inclusive benefiting rural communities and empowering people. Liberia stands ready for that journey, as we mentioned, like a practical example of the allies that we have here today. It shows how ready we are, and this is a big milestone. Like for Liberia, I want to say thanks for those words, and then we really take it into consideration. I now moving forward quickly. We'll now move into our first round of discussions. And then I would like to begin with my own Deputy Minister for the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, particularly on economic management. And I'll start with you, Honorable Minister. My first question to you will be, owing to these market conditions, what are the key institutional gaps Liberia must address to improve direct access to finance mechanisms such as the GCF? I try to repeat. Owing to all of the thematic discussions that we have been having along the COP30, what are the key institutional gaps Liberia must address to improve direct access to climate finance mechanisms such as the GCF? That's my first question.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Quite interesting and pertinent question, but I want to see how best I can address it. When it comes to institutional gaps, there's obviously the key indicators that anyone want to address in development finance. Besides development finance, in development implementation. So once you have gaps, you should be in a position to close the gap. The first thing I hear is that on the landscape of Liberia, the EARD is clear on the issue of sustainability, and we made it clear in our design of the policy itself. We'll look at a pillar that was designated strictly for environmental sustainability, which is pillar 5. Without that roadmap, it will be very difficult for you to have any institutional framework. So your national development plan is your first map that directs you into anything you're going to do. Having said all that, we feel that all cross-cutting issues regarding the environment, land, the energy, we need to coordinate it through a sectoral approach. For now, when it comes to institutional arrangement, we want to first of all say there are some gaps. I will acknowledge it. As the Ministry of Finance, we know that there are fragmented institutions in terms of climate finance negotiation. One, currently representation are also done by our partners. Our development partners are doing that. The Ministry of Finance is there. You have the FDA. You also have the Land Authority. All the institutions, the banks, IFAD, maritime as well, fishery. Although every institution that actually have climate action activity, one way or another, they are soliciting support, negotiating, and not having one institution to do that. By right, the act creating the Ministry of Finance clearly gave that role and responsibility for development planning and financing. So, as we look at it, we want to say what is the way forward. After identifying the gaps, because there's no clear direction. EPA is the National Designated Authority, which is under UNFCCC. When it comes to the political authority, is Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And now we also have the Ministry of Finance for climate action. So we are recommending that the designated authority and the EPA, where we currently have the National Climate Change Secretariat seated, it should be a room where there should be a direct coordination for policy issues. All policy coordination should be done at the EPA. And when it comes to climate finance, financial support, whether on mitigation or adaptation, being headed by the Ministry of Finance to ensure that resources are aligned with the development priorities of all the ministry agencies, even the civil society and the private sector. And one gap that also there that we see is that the insufficient legal and policy framework for managing the climate finance. And this is something that the ministry have a generic, oversight, but where you should have a direct unit or direct responsibility to say going forward, we have this unit to run it. It has to be clearly defined so that in the end, we are looking at how best we can have a national accredited institution implementing it for financial institutions. Let's say, for example, can we take one of the banks in the country, LPDR, EcoBank, or any of these financial institutions, or if we say we use a central bank, or central bank does not have that legal responsibility, it actually does the regulatory role. So how can we find an entity that helps to develop and manage the finances that come to the country while finance ministry does the coordination? Another thing that there is that we also have limited technical expertise to design high quality and bankable climate projects, as narrated by the keynote speaker. It's true. To be qualified for a climate project, there must be clear, defined, capable team that will be able to do the project design. Currently, that role is being played by the UNDP. The UNDP is assisting the country along with the Climate Change Secretariat, but UNDP cannot do all. It's playing a vital role. But is it possible at this time that we can see Our capacity building support go to entities including the Ministry of Finance and the EPA to ensure that you have high-skilled technicians who will be able to develop a proposal and push it out to our partners to ensure that they meet the purpose. In this case, we think that we are going to be setting up Cabinet Finance Readiness Program of capacity building support. Quite recently, we have Cabinet team diagnostic team that came from the island, and they also identified these clearly. We also think that we should create a project preparatory facility in the ministry agency. When you have the project preparatory facility, what it does is that they have every resource it takes. Every resource it takes to prepare a project. And that facility will help you to know what sector, for example, in agriculture, how do we do the climate smart proposal writing. So these entities will help us to ensure that we get the right financing for the sector. Another thing that is still our gap, which of course we want to give credit to the EPA, is that we still have a weak data and monetary evaluation system. And we have our team there doing pretty well collecting data, but we want for it to be more holistic. For example, our national system of account, LITIS is responsible for that. But does LITIS have the capacity to know how many indicators, how much data collection? So we need to now work along with the Ministry of Finance, the EPA, FDA, so that we can collaborate and how much information system can be collected clearly. We currently have some projects on the African Development Bank trying to work on that to address this as well. We also have a project with the World Bank and also UNDP with their project to try to make sure, but the fact is that we need a coordinated approach instead of having, pocket projects in all the administrative agencies. And that is going to get a result from the project. The last point I want to address is inadequate access to information. It's very much key because I know that Forestry Development Authority is doing pretty well, but how strong are they to cover almost all the area have a forest area? What's about the fishery authority, maritime authority? All of these entities have individual administrative data, but want to have a national data collection system on the list going forward to ensure that we strengthen collaboration with all the entities. That system will help us to make sure that our AARD reporting is more data heavy. And now with NDC implementation, so data from AARD and now with NDC, we can make sure that they are all aligned. The partners that are in the sectors are also reporting together so that coordination can be more effective and functional. On this, there are a few policy recommendations that I have here that I can talk about. Besides strengthening the institutional framework, it's good to actually have what I would call investment appraiser or public investment management team. That itself, the investment management team currently, Finance have project investment unit, but that is purely for public projects. But we're talking about where you can have the private sector, the civil society, the government coming together. We have an investment proposal team that work together and look at how best you can do smart, proposal writing. Whether a corporation is invested in Liberia, commercial banks have interest, or international banks have interest. We all know that there's a team that is more reliable, capable to do the work. So in terms of institutional capacity gap, these are the gaps that we have, and also the proposal and recommendation
and we can call for others now. Thank you.
Wow. That was really, really good. There are other things that the deputy minister wants to the issue. He acknowledged the fact that there exists institutional gap in Liberia. There also exists fragmentation, there are overlapping functions in Liberia where work can be done like trying and other things. Environmental protection agency, Ministry of Finance, even maritime authority as well. It's doing a function on behalf of other entities that should actually be doing it. They also recommend or talk about the issue of having an authority, maybe like the Central Bank of Liberia or one of our banks to be able to manage the issue of the current financing that comes to the country. And then while the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning takes on a coordinated approach towards that. Mr. Deputy Minister, I want to say thanks for sharing light on how institutional readiness remains and then how the current finance access. Thank you so much. At this point in time, I would like to move on to Madam Elizabeth Johnson, who have been the content director of Action here Liberia. I suppose this question. I want to your response. Madam Johnson, how can Liberia ensure that rural communities are not only beneficiaries but also active participants in green investment initiatives based on the background and understanding of Liberia context of what you say? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for that question. And I think thanks Mr. Deputy Minister for all of the different frameworks we talk about. And I think for now,
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment. At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, art.
To address climate-related issues, you need to be able to consider issues when it comes to rural communities. And we think that when they are considered, then we are talking about the point of equity and shared benefits. So they are not coming in just as beneficiary, but saying first is the issue around inclusiveness. So how do we involve community people in the governance process? It's not just for the implementation stage, but for the design stage. So bringing them on the table to be able to have their own issues, their raised, their voice being highlighted, I think that is the crucial part to be able to address all these issues. And we're talking about inclusive governance processes. That's very critical. We also think that we need to be able to address and establish our framework from the rights-based perspective. When we talk about rights-based perspective, is that we are looking at climate-related issues, not from a political standpoint of view, not from a profit-making standpoint of view, but putting people at the center of all of the discussions, because people are the ones that are going to be affected, especially rural communities. So we think that it's good to be able to understand their issues, to do a thorough analysis around what the issues are, and not just to do it from a rights-based approach perspective, but do it from the intersectional feminist lens. Because that will provide you the opportunity for you to understand specific needs of people as it is. So we talk about women, we talk about young people, we talk about people living with disabilities, we talk about elderly people. So we're saying that for you to be able to establish the framework, it has to be done for the inclusive governance perspective. It has to consider the issue around rights-based approach. And then you need to be able to look at what are some of the issues there's around capacity development. The issue around climate, as you may know, the phenomenon will be new, but our community people do understand. They do know what it really means. But you need to be able to bring them up to that level. So we should be able to invest a lot into capacity building. And that will be able to enable them to have a co-ownership to the in terms of decision making, in terms of negotiation, in terms of learning and all of those things. So we think capacity building and empowerment very critical. For our young people, there are different technologies. So how do we talk about green energy if they don't understand issues around the technology? So I think it's very critical for us to be able to talk about the issues around technology, but also look at community-driven solutions. Community-driven solutions. So a young person in a most rural areas that don't have access to internet, right? How do you as government make all of those facilities available to bring them on speed on par to some of these things? Because we talk about green energies, we also want to be able to look at green jobs, and they should be able to have access to all of those things. So we think as we talk about inclusiveness, we talk about it from a race-based perspective. We also think that you also be able to look at issues around community-led financing model. So what are some of those things that you are talking about the different banks? We welcome the idea or we have all of those banks. But do we ensure that some of those banks reach to the rural areas? Do we talk about our village saving clubs? Do we empower women economically? So they themselves will be able to understand this issue for being able to practically engage, because we talk about income generation. Income generation is actually critical to the issue around green jobs. So from our community driven perspective, we think that when we talk about green jobs, it should be upon what we look at the issue around it being fair. We talk about equity, and it will only be achieved if we consider the need of specific people, in the community, and we should not be able to address those issues from a generic perspective. Like I said, in the communities, there are different people that live in the community. The empowerment is very critical. Having the right system in place, that the community can have ownership, participate is very critical for the leadership of the community. So they are not just coming on board if they say, they, like I said, in the perspective of beneficiary, but they are coming on board to share their ideas being welcome, and they are also making critical decisions in terms of green job. We talk about entrepreneurship, right? What are entrepreneurship is we want to be able to talk about. So this is what we talk about youth-led solutions, community-led solutions, and I think it's very critical to also a discussion that we are having around climate financing, especially from the community perspective.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you, Madam Content Director. That has been very, very insightful, particularly on the issue of inclusiveness, that we have to have the youth involved, the local community dwellers, inclusive of the women, the elderly as well. I Not to have them at the point where we are doing implementation, but we should begin from the bottom when we have to design the programs and projects that be also implementation. You also talk about issue of green technology relating to youth. How youth can be empowered towards that is very cardinal as well. We want to say thank you for your grassroots perspective. Reminding us that real sustainability must actually be sector driven. I want to say thank you. On that note, I would like to turn on to Mr. Aliu Dia, who happens to be the UNDP resident representative in Liberia. What is question? Mr. Climate Change Expert. You organize here to listen to you very well. Your students on the board, Mr. Climate Change Expert. I would like to know what lessons from Liberia's experience can be shared with our West African countries pursuing green growth.
Very good. Thank you so much. I want to recognize our regional hub director. Matthias, I have delivered this keynote address on your behalf. Thank you for joining. What lesson can Liberia share? I think Liberia has a lot to share and to offer to the world. I have just listed a few points here that I will go through quickly. First of all, the integration of green growth in national development plans. I think absolutely important. The minister has talked about the institutional framework that we need to set up, and the Liberian government has started doing that already. Because we all know that the Arrest Agenda, the AAID, embeds green growth as a cross-cutting pillar. You know, it's all the pillars that we have. So I think that's also, I mean, the arrest agenda, the APID is such an...
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and